This statement comes directly from Mark Zuckerberg. Mark wrote this statement, and it says that Palmer's going to post, and it says, "I'm supporting Gary Johnson."
On that note, you gave me the segue that I needed already. So the new book is The History of the Future. It's Oculus, Facebook, and the revolution that swept virtual reality. For people that have no idea, I think people, a certain set of people of a certain age have a certain sense of what virtual reality is. Maybe their son or grandchild has, PlayStation VR, which I just tested out for the first time with my nephews. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, they did a good job for like an affordable VR.
All I played was that game, that first game that it comes with, that which is sort of like a Mario Brothers knockoff, and I was like, this is pretty freaking awesome.
So to explain just what it was, virtual reality, the concept, and even demos have been around since the 1960s. It's basically this idea of putting on glasses or goggles or a headset or whatever you want to call it, something that's covering your eyes, and all you see is a computer-generated world. And so back in the 1960s, 1980s, even just the graphics of like a PlayStation in the 90s, it's like very blocky polygon graphics. It doesn't really feel real. It doesn't even feel like a animated Pixar quality like movie. But then nowadays, or I guess I should just begin by saying that virtual reality was considered dead and like a waste of time back in 2012. It was like really, a technological punchline like flying cars or jetpacks. It was like this thing that's like a sci-fi trope that like we all thought was going to happen, and we were so stupid.
Right, like the ship sailed. Like if it was going to happen, it should happen. Because Nintendo did try to do that.
Nintendo Virtual Boy.
Yeah, Virtual Boy. Yeah.
Which was a very weird one because it was actually like a red colored thing, and you stick your head into it like this. But Sega actually had a VR headset that they were going to release, but then there was health concerns. So, it's been in the ether of gaming. It's been in the periphery. And the reason it never worked is manifold, but largely because it just has never worked. And you can't go to VCs and say, oh, look, this is working. Like, you basically are like, here, we have 50 years of failure. And then they would look at you like, all right, well, why do you think you're going to succeed?
Was it partly just purely cost? I mean, I know everything starts off expensive, and then as more people adopt it, it gets cheaper. But I remember in 1992 going on a family vacation to Toronto, and they had like a Nintendo expose. I think it was called Nintendo World, and they had this offshoot VR thing where we put on, I remember doing it, we put on this giant helmet, and we were in this like circle thing, and it was me and my brother, and we had to shoot each other, and it was awesome. It was blocky and pixelated and all that, but it was cool as hell. Like, you kind of felt like you were going to fall off a ledge and all that stuff. But it was my point is that it was a lot of equipment. It was a lot of stuff that would have cost a ton of money when you're trying to get these into kids' homes, when the system itself only cost $80.
No, you're right. One thing I'd say, like I described it as blocky and polygon like a PlayStation game. And so people look back and like, oh, of course it failed. And then it's like, no, we were playing games of that quality on PlayStation. That was cutting edge to us. So that wasn't why it failed. And I thought it was cool. Like if you had pulled me aside in like 1994 and were like, hey kid, I don't know, some creepy pedophile. No, if you're like, hey kid, I'm from the future. Virtual reality is gonna be the biggest thing in the world. I'd be like, duh, of course. Like we all know that that's happening. So I wasn't particularly into it. It just seemed so obvious. It was, there was movies like Lawnmower Man. It was just more and more like seeming like a part of our lives. It was in the mall. And you're right, like the at-home consumer sort of console version was way too expensive. But the way that it succeeded at first or became sort of ubiquitous was the location based, like at malls. You pay $15 and you go play with your brother, and it was probably a good use of money. Your parents were happy to have you go in there. But that ended because the market just dried up. They were losing money on this, and VR was left for dead. And then in 2012, or between 2009 and 2012, a 16-year-old kid in 2009, 19-year-old kid in 2012 named Palmer Luckey was obsessed with VR. He was a self-taught engineer slash tinkerer who loved modifying old consoles and actually portabilizing old consoles. Like him and his buddies would take your Nintendo and figure out like, how can we make the smallest version that you can bring on the go with you. So he was almost like uniquely talented to be dealing with retro consoles, but with he is a genius level talent. And so he spent 3 years. My book begins in 2012. He's living in a trailer in Long Beach, California. The trailer's parked in his parents' driveway because they had kicked him out of the house, but he could at least stay in the driveway.
Not off the property, yeah.
And I remember him telling me, I was like, tell me what the trailer looked like. And he had gutted the kitchen, and it was basically just this mad scientist laboratory of building VR headsets. And I was like, this sounds a lot like Walter White's Meth Van, but like curated for VR headsets instead of meth. And he's like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. So you got this image of this 19-year-old mad scientist, genius guy working on this technology that no one cares about. Like even his friends who love gaming are like, dude, VR died. But he loved it, and he created this prototype that could be made for a few $100s. And even at that time, it's been 10, 20 years since what you were talking about. Like the best VR headsets would still cost $5,000 or $10,000, and he created something that was better than all of that and cost a few $100s. And then his sort of like being discovered moment was this game maker named John Carmack, who's one of the most legendary game makers. He's responsible for Doom and Wolfenstein and Quake and all the id Software, and he had licensed those games in the 90s to VR companies that wanted to make, like location-based stuff, and it sucked. And John Carmack, he's probably even smarter than Palmer. He's a real genius. He whenever he finishes a game, he takes a little R&D period where he investigates some unknown technology or unknown to him technology. One time this resulted in him starting an aerospace company because he's just like, I spent a few weeks learning rocket science.
Why not? Yeah.
So he learned rocket science and started a company. And so in 2012, after he finished, or late 2011, after he finished this game called Rage, he was like, virtual reality, whatever happened to that? It's been so long. It must have progressed so much since I last looked at this. And he realized, like, no, it's just as bad. And, like, it's such a Carmack thing to say. He told me, he's like, I was actually offended by how much had not progressed as a technologist, as an idealist. And then he was searching on the internet. He heard about this, this hardware hacker named Palmer Luckey. He got in touch with him. He asked to borrow his headset, and then he was really impressed. He ended up bringing it to the annual trade show E3 in 2012 and demoing it, and it was like it won like so many awards, and it was this homemade thing competing against like the millions and billions of dollars, the $1 million booths and $1 billion products from Nintendo and Sony and all that. And then that sort of is what led to the beginning of Oculus and Palmer Luckey bursting onto the scene.
There's a lot to go. I can go in a lot of different directions there. So now VR has had this sort of rebirth, and people are using it again, and they're using it not only for gaming but for all sorts of things.
Yep.
What's the Facebook part of this story? Yeah.
So partly also to answer your question of like why didn't it work before? I mean, a lot of it is just technology. Moore's Law, things get better. Palmer Luckey would be the first to say that if not for the advances in cell phone technology with tracking and the screens, like he wouldn't have succeeded. If he had been born 20 years earlier, he wouldn't have been so lucky. Okay, there, I said use the pun. It was really hard in the book to avoid using like lucky.
That must have been difficult.
I was proud to say I never did it. But the technology was such a big part of it, and really like everyone who is in the VR space who's visionary, very few people then, a lot of people now, they all, it's all the same end goal, where you could put on a headset and potentially have an experience like The Matrix, and it would be like, as thin as glasses like this, and it would be as real as The Matrix. But it's really just a matter of how do we get there, and how do we do it in a way where you can monetize it. And what I thought was so cool about Oculus and why I was interested in writing the book was they thought the video games were the way in. It wasn't like Palmer was like, video games is the whole point of VR. It was actually gamers tend to have a lot of disposable income, and they're willing to spend it on higher end things. So we can sell these headsets for $300 and sell games. And it was like, this is the perfect market. This is the perfect stepping stone to get to where we want VR to go. This is how we grow the industry. And so they launched a Kickstarter on August 1st, 2012. They were trying to raise $400,000. They raised $2.5 million. Their slogan, because we know that the marketing and promotion is really important, was step into the game, and that was created by Palmer's co-founders. They sort of brought this business marketing savvy to the whole thing. It was a great peanut butter and jelly combination, with Palmer being the hardware maker and them being, they had a background, they were software makers and so, I was really fascinated by using gaming as the way into growing this technology. And then in a surprise to me and to most people, in 2014, so less than 2 years after the company was founded, they sold to Facebook for $3 billion. And, one of the reasons they did that was just because the resources that Facebook would give them, where basically like we don't need to make money for the foreseeable future. Like we will, and Facebook will make these investments. But Facebook also went away from gaming for probably reasons that we'll get into a little bit, which is like the cultural, the Gamergate, like this is a toxic white male space that we don't want to be in, or
because only awful white male neo-Nazis play video games.
Yeah, and it was like, like obviously that's not true. Also, that's just a really stupid business strategy because, one of the things. This is flashing forward a bit, but like before, so I got incredible access for the book. Anyone who's read anything I've written, I like to tell character-driven stories, and I can't do it without access. Like I would never write a book about your life without, some way that I was going to get a lot of interviews with you, ideally a lot of archival texts and emails and all that. I'm still writing it independently, but I just couldn't imagine doing it without that. Because how else can I put readers in the room with you and in your head? And so I got this incredible access that lasted for 2.5 years and ended for reasons that we'll definitely get to. But my last visit to Facebook's campus in Menlo Park was February of 2018. And I remember talking to the 2 new heads of Oculus after the founders were no longer in charge. And one of them had presided over Android going from 25 million to 1 billion users, and the other was a guy who actually used to be Mark's TA back in college and had joined the company really early on and talked about how originally they had been so successful in colleges, and then they went mainstream. And both of them talked about like, we're now at this point where we've already succeeded with gamers and now we're going mainstream. And it was like, it just reminded me sort of like the ET thing where it's like, no, you're putting the cart before the horse. Like you just assume success, and then you're moving on to the next thing. Like, I know so many gamers who hate you, who think you guys are doing a terrible job. And fortunately, I think Facebook has actually gravitated back more towards the evil, toxic gamer space. But it was just interesting to look at it along that lens that I never would have thought. I never would have thought the cultural aspect would be a part of my story. And then, of course, it became a huge part of the story because Palmer Luckey got fired in the middle of my writing the book.
Right. So, okay, can you explain that? Because that then sort of that connects all of this for the average person that watches my show normally. That's like, this show is a little offbeat for what you normally do, which is completely fine. But this now is sort of what is going to link it to almost everything else.
Yeah, so the story of my life the past few years. I mean, so Palmer was the founder, the visionary of Oculus. He was 19 years old. He was 21 when they sold it. He's a brilliant, charismatic guy. He was the face of the industry. Important character. And so he also happened to be a Trump supporter. And originally, this was something that he was like there's a video from February of 2016 there was like a Trump rally, and he appeared on an NBC News piece and was at the Trump rally.
Let me get this straight. This man supports the President of the United States and expects to have a job and be a functioning member of society. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Well, it was just interesting because
I can't believe we're even doing this.
Of course there should be nothing wrong with openly, publicly supporting one of the 2 major candidates in a 2-party system. But then I noticed he stopped publicly doing it, and what happened was the only other person in Silicon Valley who publicly supported Trump, and these are not my words, this is Mark Andreessen, the most famous VC, has talked about how he's only actually knows two out Trump supporters, Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey. And Peter Thiel spoke at the RNC, and Peter Thiel is famous for PayPal, but also being the first investor in Facebook and being on the board of Facebook. And all across Facebook campus, people fought so hard to get him fired for the crime of supporting Trump and speaking at the RNC. And so Palmer's like, okay, well, I should probably not be so public about this because this is what will happen to me. And that was both foreshadowing and also important because what happened was in September of 2016, so this was 2 months before the election, Palmer donated a little bit less than $10,000 to an organization called Nimble America. Nimble America's goal was to put up billboards across the country. Really, really wild stuff. They're like, what ended up getting them into trouble was that they spoke in the parlance of the Donald subreddit, and they said, we have proved that meme magic is real. We're going to shitpost across America, by which they just meant we, the royal we, Donald, and like, we're going to put up billboards. The only billboard Nimble America ever put up in its entire existence was a billboard, a slightly characterized image of Hillary Clinton's face with the headline, "Too big to jail." So
just to be clear, in case people are missing some of this, because there's so much here, he gave $10,000 to this company. They were going to put up billboards that were going to just put memes up. So the memes that had been sort of bouncing all over the internet, that's all they were doing.
Like, and not even like, well, we'll get into
because the memes were the things that actually were fueling the Trump campaign, but a lot of them were just shit posting kids coming up with funny things.
And memes, like, to me, I think there's a very internet aspect to it. Like, when you're actually putting up physical billboards, they're just called advertisements.
Right.
I mean, they might look like memes or whatever.
Right.
But I guess we'd say modern.
You can't share that. You lose some of the meme magic, let's say.
Yeah, but like, and then also, talking to the founders of Nimble America, because this would become an issue in a second I'll get to, but like, the way, okay, well, let's just say what happens next. So on September 22nd, 2016, the Daily Beast comes out with an article about Palmer, and the headline is, Facebook billionaire secretly funding Trump's meme machine. And the insinuation was that every terrible meme that you'd seen online during this past election season, everything transphobic, concentration camps, anti-Semitic, all this stuff, Palmer Luckey was the guy funding it all. And if you didn't get that from the headline and the article, this tech blogger named Anil Dash explicitly said...
that guy, he's no fan of mine.
Oh, he's no fan of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, high five.
Yeah, because I was tweeting about Apu, that I think Apu should be allowed to be in The Simpsons, and he told me I'm racist. And
Well, he was kinder to you than to me. So,
yeah, all right.
Because I want... My job as a journalist is to speak with all the people involved in this. So I wanted to hear his side of the story, because he did post that Palmer was using his billions, remember, $10,000. But I don't even think the money thing is irrelevant. The fact is that this organization, whether Palmer gave $1 or $1 million, they weren't doing anything inappropriate.
Right.
And he said that Palmer was responsible for every white supremacist meme that you'd seen. And then, of course...
Wait, we've got to pause for a second. You're telling me Daily Beast did something that didn't have great journalist integrity?
Speaking of integrity, here's an interesting thing. And I tried to handle it
Next you're going to tell me BuzzFeed's up to the same thing. HuffPo, Vox, I can't believe it.
So what happened, actually, the way that it all played out was Palmer donated to Nimble America. They... because he was doing it anonymously after learning from the Peter Thiel situation, his moniker there was Nimble Rich Man. They said, we have a wealthy benefactor, that they thought this would give legitimacy to the organization. People on Reddit said, oh, you don't really have a wealthy backer. They got Milo Yiannopoulos, who was a moderator, popular on the Donald, to verify that Palmer existed, not say his name, but basically be like, I have confirmed that there is a wealthy person. So the Nimble America thing launched on September 17th. A few days later, Gideon Resnick from the Daily Beast emails Milo, and I always just found it funny because, he writes these hit pieces on Milo, fair or not, but just, he's so friendly. He's like, hey buddy, like, how's it going?
Yeah, but that's what they always do.
I know, but I don't think most people know that. I think most people...
they always do that.
But yeah, because I included the emails in the book. But so he contacts Milo and says, what's the deal with this Nimble America thing? Up the previous month, Gideon Resnick had written an article about how Milo's privileged scholarship thing was a scam. I have no idea whether it was or not, but Milo interpreted it as a hit piece and assumed that Gideon was going to write another hit piece. Milo said, I have no affiliation with this thing other than I verified that there was a wealthy person. Gideon keeps pressing. Milo asks Palmer if he could reveal his name so that Milo's off the hot seat. Palmer, they end up basically agreeing that Palmer will reveal himself as long as there's no article written, or if there's an article written, his identity is kept secret.
Jesus Christ, this is like talking about Batman and Bruce Wayne, okay?
But anyway, that agreement was struck. The Gideon Resnick from the Daily Beast said, sure, he would do this anonymously. He ended up revealing Palmer's name. Now, like I said, it was difficult for me to handle the book because, I think at the end of the day, all that someone like my mom or most viewers should care about is, what happened. Not fruit from the forbidden tree. That's, procedural stuff that you and I as journalists and storytellers can care about. But, the average person should just care about what did Palmer actually do, what did he donate to, what did this organization do. So I don't want to focus too much on that, but I just was disgusted by the Daily Beast. Not surprising. And then, of course, within a matter of hours after the article claiming that Palmer is responsible for all this stuff, every single tech press, it was really just that game of telephone that we all know happens, but it was like to actually look at the headlines. I once lined them up. You know, you have this Palmer Luckey secretly funding Trump's meme machine. Then Ars Technica a few hours later. Palmer Luckey secretly funding Trump's racist meme machine.
Yeah.
Same exact headline, but let's throw in the word racist. And it's just like escalates like that.
Well, it's so funny because just as you're saying this, what popped into my head was our friend Colin Moriarty, who's been on the show many times, and when he got into hot water over his tweet, which was, you know, International Women's Day, finally a little peace and quiet, Business Insider wrote, the headline was Colin Moriarty of, what was his old company?
Kind of Funny.
Of Kind of Funny, his racist tweet.
Which is so funny because, like,
but it had nothing to do with racism.
Racism and sexism are real problems, but I'll identify myself as a liberal here, like, and they are just used as like synonymous buzzwords, like, oh, you did something bad, that was a racist comment.
You can acknowledge that they are real things, but that doesn't mean they're the same thing. They're still different things, But this sort of thing then, where the media then catches on and it spreads like wildfire and they just replicate headlines and the rest of it.
And we can get into that and the fake news and all of that, because that is important. But here's the real fucked up part of the story. So all of this is happening. I would, the next day, the press culminates the next day with Wired. I would have thought the most venerable tech press out there. They have a headline: Palmer Luckey's the worst, but he doesn't represent Silicon Valley. Like, that's not news. He's the worst for supporting Trump. But anyway, you can imagine the firestorm at Facebook. This is a public figure. This is your young, charismatic, chosen one, and he is being called a racist. He's being called the worst person on the internet. People are saying boycott Oculus, all this stuff. Real PR disasters, and I'm sympathetic to that. But so what happened was, Palmer, one of the biggest influences in his life is debate, and so one of the things I really like about him is that he's always willing to talk things out. He doesn't just have his opinion and say, well, that's my way or the highway. So his response was to write a public statement and explain, like, most of the stuff is not true. Here's what is true. Here's what's not true. Like, it's a very Palmer way of dealing with this. And he described that this organization, Nimble America, he had donated them because of the principles of so he wanted to put an end to America's never-ending wars and the millions of people dying, which also becomes relevant with the company started after this. But it certainly didn't persuade me to vote for Trump. But it was at least he wasn't just let's drink liberal tears. He had a reasoned, he had his reasoning for this, and explained why he supported Trump. Facebook would not let him put that message up. This news all hit at 6 p.m. Pacific time on a Thursday, I think. Palmer wrote a statement almost right away, wanted to put it up. Facebook wouldn't let him say he supported Trump. Unbelievable.
I mean, it's Orwellian of the, I know.
That's crazy. Again, at that point, Trump was one of two people in a two-party system, who I personally despise, but I also, more importantly, think everyone should be able to support any candidate they want, especially a non-fringe candidate.
Wait, I hate to do this, but our schedule is so nuts today, so we have to somehow, can we do this all in 5 minutes? Is that even remotely possible? All right, let's try to do this in 5 minutes.
So anyway, Palmer's dying to get the statement out. Every hour new articles coming out. And then finally he gets a statement that he is told to post. And this statement comes directly from Mark Zuckerberg. Mark wrote the statement, and it says that Palmer's going to post, and it says, I'm supporting Gary Johnson. So Palmer is being told to lie about his politics and say that he's supporting Gary Johnson. And Palmer, of course, doesn't want to do this, but he's told he'll be fired if he doesn't do it. So he does that, and that's illegal in California. Also really unethical.
Wait, what's illegal?
To force someone to lie about their political beliefs in a public statement. Then Palmer is put on suspension for the next 6 months, and then ends up being fired. But I just could not believe that Mark personally wrote a statement that was so intolerable to support Trump that he had to say that he was supporting Gary Johnson. And then that also was terrible for his reputation, what was left of it, because the liberal mainstream press went after him with the racist bullshit. But then all the MAGA people who, he got a lot of messages like, I'm going to buy a headset because I want to support you. They're all like, he's either a coward or he really is a Gary Johnson supporter, and I think he's an idiot.
You must have talked to him about why he didn't just take whatever money he had gotten already and just walked.
Well, I had to be very careful with things I talked with him, and obviously he signed agreements. But I have a very close relationship. I've spoken with him almost every day for the past 3 years. And fortunately, people on Facebook thought what happened was so messed up. They were really helpful to getting me internal documents. So I was able to piece together the story, get Mark's actual email forcing Palmer to lie about his political beliefs. But the short answer to your question, that I have never been able to actually ask him, but it's because he would have done anything to stay at Oculus. Like
it was his baby.
Yeah, it was his baby. Like at one point after they tried to fire him and give him none of his remaining vesting money, basically it was a backloaded deal. He said, "Okay, I'll work there for free," but they wouldn't let him continue to work there. Like it was his everything.
God,
yeah,
it's like Silicon Valley on HBO. It's bananas.
Yeah.
There's so much more here, and there's such a connection between this last. I will gladly have you back. I mean, this last 15 minutes, especially, it's so connective to so many of the things I talk about related to the tech world and free speech and politics and the mob and all of these things. So it's fascinating, and then
I'll do a very quick thing.
Yes, do something quick.
I start by saying Console Wars. Like I was the darling of the tech press world. I wrote this book that was being turned into a movie. Most people like the book because I think it was very well written, or just because it was a Sega Nintendo thing. It is now July. The book's been out for 4 months. There still has not been a single review of the book. Not a single person in the tech or gaming community has acknowledged my book.
God, these evil freaks.
Fortunately, our mutual friend,
So
Glenn
we're
Beck,
gonna
has promoted the hell out of it, had me on a few times, and the book went up to #2 on all of Amazon, which totally kicked the butt of my first book. So this book has outsold my first book, which was the best-selling video game book of all time, and there still has not been a single review. I wonder why.
All right. Well, I don't write book reviews, but we will link to, should we link to Amazon? Is that where you want us to link? We will link to Amazon for this book. We'll do this again because there's so much more here, and it's so connected to some of those other things. We'll stream some video games or something, because especially if you're not very good, it would be a pleasure to beat you in something. All right, it's been fun. There's a lot more here, obviously. For more on Blake, follow him on the Twitter machine at Blake J. Harris, NYC.